What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Uncommon Ground. I am Mike Wright. I'm the non-believer of the group, and Uncommon Ground is the name of this podcast. We are in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and we're based out of Allison Creek Presbyterian Church. And again, like I said, I am the non-believer, and if you are curious on why that is, we have this podcast to have conversation. And basically, we want to have those conversations that most people probably feel uncomfortable about, and put it out there and see what people really think about their religious beliefs sometimes, and how maybe it can be thought differently from someone else's point of view. It doesn't have to be one point of view all the time. So we encourage you to listen and to join in our conversation. I hope you can also join in with other people as well. So to my left is Sam McGregor. He's pastor of Allison Creek Presbyterian Church. And to my right is my wife, Janine. And she has more of a spiritual belief, but her opinion differs than mine. So last week we started with Exodus, just going in the first part of it with Moses and trying to get rid of all the Egyptians and everything like that.
Oh gosh.
And
wipe out the Egyptians.
And then this week we're going to continue and talk more about the 10 Commandments and everything like that. So we'll continue the story. So Sam, if you want to continue.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, actually, so in the story, which we referenced in our first podcast last week, the Israelites are enslaved, and then God leads Moses to lead the people out of slavery, and then the Egyptians pursue them, but then God provides a way for them to get through the Red Sea, and then the Red Sea envelops the Egyptian army, and so they're wiped out. So tough for them. Sorry, Egyptians, And then they go on this journey in the wilderness, which ends up being 40, which is actually 40 is a biblical number of testing and completeness of a time of period of challenge. And so in the journey, the Israelites complain they don't have enough food, they don't have enough water, but then God always provides what they need with quail or with manna, which is basically a dough that they end up making and using, which probably is not very tasty, but it sustains them for a long period of time. And then we get to this part of the journey where they do encounter the Amalekites, but then they're victorious over the Amalekites, and then Moses is getting overwhelmed with all his responsibilities, and so his father-in-law tells him, hey dude, you need to start giving up some of your responsibilities, which Moses does as far as being a judge for all the disputes. And then we have the story of Moses being led up the mountain, which we're told is either Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. And there he is presented a set of rules, and we call these the 10 Commandments, although there ends up being about 600 plus statutes that are also in this, which are very, very specific to the setting and very specific to the time. But what we call the 10 Commandments are rules which are certainly transferable from that period to today. And so that's what we're going to look at today. But we also may have some questions about who God is and what God looks like. So
with the 10 Commandments, I mean, what makes you think the definition of the 10 Commandments leads to what they are? Like, why are... Because you had mentioned earlier that the first 4 are to honor God, and then the rest of them are to honor your community. And why are the ones that are honor your community like kind of spread out? Why are they not like all condensed into one? Because they all kind of seem to be the same one. So why are they all separate?
Well, in the New Testament, we get Jesus being asked, "What's the most important commandment?" And Jesus boils down these commandments into two commandments, which is basically what these commandments are, which is love God and love your neighbor. And so if you look at the first 4, it's about loving God, and if you look at the last 6, it's about loving your neighbor. And so that really is what the commandments are all about. It's about guidance being given to a community about how are you to be community, and you're to be a vital community by loving God and loving your neighbor. And
So
let me break that down in how to do that.
So pretty much the 10 Commandments is like the long-winded version, and then Jesus came back with the Cliff Notes.
Jesus kind of narrowed it down. Yes, made it. What exactly?
So with that being said, which we're not in that part of the story yet, but with that being said, if he narrowed it down to 2, why are the 10 important? Like, why are they separated into 10 different commandments if they're really only 2 that are kind of the important ones about loving God and loving community? Why are they all separate?
I guess because you have to highlight each individual thing, and you have to kind of show emphasis on each individual thing.
But I think you could have like the 2 paragraphs.
Well, if you make something too vague, then people aren't going to get the full message. That's the thing.
What I'm saying is you have 2 paragraphs instead of the 10 Commandments. You just have 2 paragraphs. I know it's not as like
people like lists.
I know it's not as
you like lists, don't you, Janine?
We do like lists. It's the top 10 list of,
and that's what
There
people
you
like.
go.
David Letterman made a killing on that.
Yeah.
There you go.
okay.
So my thing about the 10 Commandments I was talking about was a lot of talk of false gods and numerous gods, and that's kind of the thing that we talked about last week, and just kind of touching on that. Like, are there other gods, and is God supposed to be like the head God, and he doesn't really want you to acknowledge these gods? Or that's kind of where my confusion kind of comes from as well.
Well, I think if we look at the particularly the Old Testament story, I think it is kind of like a competition, and God saying there are lots of gods that you can choose to follow, but let me tell you why I'm the one that you should choose to follow. I'm going to lead you to places of deliverance. I'm going to lead you to places of justice. I'm going to lead you to places of grace and love. And these other gods that you can choose to follow are not going to lead you in those directions.
But he still threatens you to
What
do
do you
so.
mean?
That he says to you need to follow these guidelines, or I'm gonna smite you, or I'm gonna do whatever. I mean, even in Exodus, in this part, I mean, he tells you that you are supposed to like make an altar to him and things like that. And those are and if you don't make an altar, I mean, he did say that someone who does not follow the commandments and doesn't do these things will not go without punishment. So he still puts this fear in you to follow him or else.
And I can hear your this is really disturbing to you.
Well, it is. I mean, to be bullied,
this exclusivity
to be bullied
is really disconcerting to you.
Well, it's one of those things that everyone claims that he loves all of his creations and stuff like that, yet he still wants to play with them and take a magnifying glass to them, And it's it's a little disconcerting that people want to follow something that's willing to set you on fire.
Well, he's not going to set you on fire. That's yeah. So I
use the magnifying glass
I
as
think there's a difference between how people describe God and maybe how God really is. I think people make it seem like God is this scary, vengeful, jealous, vindictive kind of God, but that doesn't necessarily have to be how it is. It's almost like bedtime stories, and you scare things as when you're growing up. Fairy tales, they're right. Kind of like fairy tales, but they have these things that scare people, and so it may be people's how they try to teach God to people, but that's not necessarily how God really is.
So to follow on that point, the interesting thing is that most of the time, and Pastor Sam, you do this as well, is when after you tell your sermon and stuff, you say, "This is the word of the Lord," which means that the Lord is telling you these things. So he's telling
I don't
you.
say that after my sermon. I say that after the scripture reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then
I don't say that. I do not. I mean, what I try to do in a sermon is to give a faithful interpretation. I do not say that this is God's word.
Still, the scripture coming from the Bible.
The scripture coming from the Bible.
Right.
Yes, I believe that. Yes, that it is God's words being spoken through the Bible, through human people.
So, with that being said, when
human agendas.
When you, Janine, were saying that like this is people's interpretations. When you say it's the word of the Lord, that's saying that you are quoting him, and that this is what it is. It's actually like putting quotes on it.
Yeah, but I also look at the Bible different than Pastor Sam looks at the Bible.
I mean, this is true.
So the way I feel that people have kind of added a little, extra details to stories to try to make it seem a little bit more, like you're scaring a person into believing something, whereas it's possible that's not how, it doesn't have to be that scary. Because some things like you read in the Bible, and I've said this before, some things you see in the Bible and it comes off very scary. Whereas other times, you can have messages and it just comes off like you're learning a lesson, but you don't have to be scared into it. I feel like it should be a little bit more, I'm not saying you have to hold someone's hand, but I feel like there's just a lot of like fear and a lot of darkness. And
so let's focus on what we're looking at today, the Ten Commandments. Do you see that as dark?
I feel a little bit, because even like saying like the other gods, where did they come from? Like, and are they able to kind of take over, or like I don't understand, like if God created everything, where did these other gods come from? Or are they just a figure of people's imaginations and they're not really gods? So that's kind of like, did he create these people, or were they, things that he had, whether it be angels or whatever, and then they kind of turned on him, and that's why he's saying, don't look at them, don't follow them. So I even think that is, kind of scary, because now there's things out there that can tempt you and, sway you.
There are things out there that can tempt you. I mean, I remember being in a seminary class, and we kept, kind of saying, well, where does evil come from? Where does evil come from? And ultimately, my professor, Shirley Guthrie, would say, evil is that which is what God does not create. Now, I mean, that's kind of a mind-blowing.
Yeah. That just makes the question like, wait, right, I have more questions after that.
Right. So, so I guess, your question, where do other gods come from? I guess I would say, I would kind of respond to that in the same way and say that other gods are things that are outside of what God creates.
So with that being said, I feel like I have questions in my head as far as like, if that's the case, then how is it not that possibly another God created Earth, or another God created man, or another God created animals or whatever, and then the God that is in the Bible just took over. Because I mean, here's the thing. So
he's a ponder on that one.
So he
like a hermit crab. God is a giant hermit crab.
Oh gosh!
He moves into somebody else's territory and takes over.
I mean, who knows? It could be. I mean, but it's like, it's one of those things where people will talk about like sin, about you shouldn't have sin, you shouldn't have sin in your heart, and all this other stuff. But it's written, especially in the Ten Commandments, that he is a jealous God. He states that I am a jealous God. But isn't jealousy a form of sin in the form of lust of something that someone else has that you want? Like if you're jealous of someone, you have lust in your heart, right? So wouldn't that be one of the sins? And how does he, if he's supposed to be this not like all powerful whatever that doesn't have any flaws, how does he have those kind of sins as well?
Well, one of the things it's important to understand is that language is a human created concept.
Right.
And so anytime that we use language to describe who God is or what God says, by the very nature of using language, we are constricting who God is.
Right.
Because human language has definitions, and what a word in one language doesn't translate into another language well sometimes. And so I mean to me, what you reference as God being a jealous God, I don't see that as jealousy in the sense of
materialistic things.
Well, you're my you're hanging out with such and such, and I want you to be my friend. What I see it as God saying, What is best for you is to be exclusively in a relationship with me and trust me fully and completely. And I can see that that's not something you want to go for. And
I think I would feel more comfortable if people describe God as he's a loyal God. He's a loyal. That's what I would say. I wouldn't say the word jealous. I think that's the word that we're bringing it into more of like that human kind of aspect, because we're thinking when someone is jealous of someone, they're jealous that they have this fancy car or they have this big house. So we're going to translate it that way. Whereas if we say he's a loyal God and he's, you know, he's a God that, you know, wants you to just, you know, follow with him and be with him, but not that he's jealous, because I think that's when you put the bad notation. And I think people like Mike, that's what they hear. They hear he's like this, gimme that. And like I was saying, if God was a person, would you want to be his friend? Now, if I heard someone say, hey, that's God over there, he's a really jealous friend, I would be like, I don't know if I want to be his friend. But if they said, hey, that's God over there, he's a really loyal God, he's a really loyal friend, you'd be like, I think I want a friend like that. I think it's the way the wording was, you know, put out.
Well,
because we're translating it different.
We have to realize that translating different or not, this is how we communicate. And if you use words in a certain way to communicate, you need to know that someone is going to take those words a certain way. And that if you use the words like jealous, you're standoffish. But and whether it translated right or not, you have to know whoever's translating it. Like, I don't know if that translates right. I'm gonna have to change something, which they've done over time in the Bible. Especially like listening to when people talk today. That's not exactly the words that were read in my version. So they change things over the years.
Well, it's not that it's not that you're changing things. Why we have different translations of the Bible is because of different folks going back to trying to go back to original documents and trying to translate those original documents to language which is understandable and appropriate for today. So, like, you know, the King James Version was written in Old English, and it was also, there were not very many source documents that were used in the translation of the King James Version, whereas translations today, like say the New Revised Standard Version or other translations, they're using much more. They're using a wide variety of original text. See, there's not a original Bible. First of all, the Bible is not a book; it's a collection of books. It's more like a library. Yeah. And so it's not like you can go back and say, "Oh, well, this is, you know, we have the original Bible." We don't. We have different pieces that, and that's a whole nother conversation about how those pieces got to put together and such as they did. I mean, there's all sorts of agendas and why certain books got included and why some did not get included. But again, going back, anytime you use language to try to describe God, you are limiting God right away.
Yeah. But going back to what you said, would you, based on how, like Janine was saying, being God's friend?
So I would ask Janine, what is your image of who God is?
Okay. So based on a lot of like church and Bible and their description of what God is, I would say he's a jealous person that will hold grudges, and who will, at the same time, will love you and give you things, will teach you lessons, and he will try to steer you the right way. But if you go the wrong way, he's going to really make you pay. Like, he's really going to make you remember over and over that you did that. And I say that also because even after going back to Adam and Eve, they made this mistake. They made a horrible mistake. They disobeyed. I understand. But it's like, that mistake that they made, people are still paying for it. Like their children were still paying for it. They still pay for it. So it's like you hold grudges. That's how I see, based on the way God is described. Me, I see God as someone who wants to help you do good. He's going to teach you lessons. When you do something wrong, he's going to call you out on it. He's not going to be like, oh, well, that's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. He'll call you out on it, let you learn your lesson, but he's not going to hold it against you and always have to throw it back in your face. But he's going to be there with you as partnership, and he's going to guide you and walk with you, and also let you take the lead when you need to as well, when he feels that you are strong and able to do that. And that's how my relationship is with God. But when I read the Bible, it's this mean guy who's just kind of like, I'm going to teach you, but if you mess up, I'm going to make you know over and over that you messed up.
So without knowing a whole lot about your church background, Janine, I mean, what I'm hearing from what you're saying is the way God was presented to you was what I would use the term of fire and brimstone. That, you need to do this or you're going to be punished. And so God becomes something to fear and be uncomfortable around, because, God is this very oppressive, male dominating figure. And if that image of God is presented to me, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And I think, unfortunately, that's where the institutional church has been very bad for a lot of folks who, they have been presented that image of God, and they don't want to have anything to do with that. And so, therefore, if that's the way religion is going to present God to me, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
I agree. And I think a lot of people have been given that image. And then when they feel that they've done wrong, they feel, well, the church isn't going to accept me because I'm this kind of person. And based on the people, the person that they're all, this God that they're talking about, he's not going to like a person like me. Or, so I think that makes them feel like it's not as welcoming, because they feel judged and they feel like their wrongs, they're already too far gone. So, and it's when you do something bad and you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to keep living the life of crime. I'm not even going to try to, change myself. And that's kind of, I think that's just not as welcoming. And I feel like that's where it needs to be.
I mean, I think that's more of just a problem amongst people, though. Not about like just church
and that's why I say, I feel like it's been put in a lot of people's minds, and then they have that kind of this scary God, he's aggressive, he's this, and then they tell other people that. But I don't feel like that's probably the way God was intended to be interpreted. I think that it was supposed to be a little bit more of a welcoming and just warm, comforting kind of feeling, whereas it's now kind of everyone has kind of like, you got to be afraid, you sinned, you got to be afraid. And I feel like that's what a lot of it is. So I think it's a lot of having to undo a lot of people's and some people don't even realize that that's the kind of person, if let's say God is a person, that's the kind of energy that they're saying God has, just as aggressive and angry and jealous. And that's why I said the choice of words, I think that's what actually is pushing people away from wanting to learn more. And
I feel a need to want to apologize. Apologize to you, Janine, for the way the institutional church has greatly distorted who God is. And so that, the image that you have received that was provided to you, which unfortunately is the image that a lot of people are provided, is this, dominating, judgmental, male God that, a lot of folks have said, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
But I don't think the male part is what bothers people. I think it's the kind of like dominating and judgmental part. Because I don't really feel like, I don't think people should be like, I feel now that the God that, I have a relationship with, it's still a guy. He's still so it's like I don't feel like I just feel like his approach, when I had to learn through my own life and my own journey, with my beliefs, it didn't have to be so scary the way people were, making it seem. But I'm okay with saying that, God is a dude and, all this stuff. And I don't think, it matters. I feel like however you see God, if it helps you, that's how I feel. I feel like if you see God as your cat that sits on the couch every day and you want to talk to your cat, and that's you. But if you feel like you have some kind of faith, then, and you feel comfortable in it and you don't feel threatened or pressured or feared into faith, then I think that that's a good thing.
Well, and that's very important, Jeannie, because I think scaring somebody into faith is not faith. That's I don't know what that is, but what I hope maybe through our time together is that we will start to see a wide variety of images of God that are presented in the scriptures. And I mean, when I do chapel with the preschoolers, we always have a prayer time, and I always invite them to close their eyes and then imagine what you think God looks like to you, whatever you think that is. And unfortunately, some of them think that I'm God, and that's a totally what a distorted image of God those kids get. But I think what you've described as your image of God is not the image that I have. And again, if I had the image that you've just described, I would not want to have anything to do with that.
I can respect that. Yeah. But like I said, everyone's journey is their own. And I feel like it's the same thing like when you read a book and then they turn it into a movie and you're like, I didn't picture that guy as the lead, or I didn't picture the scene or the scenery or anything looking like that. So everyone's going to have their own vision, but you can still appreciate it. You can still appreciate the book, but you just say, that's not how I envisioned it. So.
She didn't like Charleston Heston.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, white guy. It's not what Moses looked like. So I hope that when we start getting into look at some New Testament and looking at Jesus' relationship and to God and how that maybe that will open up some different ways of who God is. But also in ultimate, there's so much here, and as if we continue to look through the Moses and his relationship with God, it is a very dynamic relationship. Some very challenging conversations in which I would like us to look at some texts where Moses says to God, you said you were faithful and you're not being faithful, and remember, this is the promise you made. And I mean, it is very much where Moses challenges God to say, you need to keep your promises, God. And, I think those are cool kinds of conversations that Moses has with God that are
that
very
he can bring those
challenging.
Questions up. Yeah, definitely.
Because we also have texts where God changes God's mind. I mean, that's what the text says. Yeah. And so I would like to explore that.
So real quick before we go, I have to bring it back to the 10 Commandments. I have one other thing I should have brought up earlier that I was just thinking about.
Oh, he's getting ready to drop a big one.
Oh, gosh.
So with the 10 Commandments, it says that you should not create any images of anything from heaven, earth, or below. But doesn't almost every church do that with doing crucifix of Jesus and angels on windows and things like that, and rays of light for heaven? And aren't those all objects of heaven, earth, and below? Well, not really below, but all these things. Shouldn't all these churches be destroyed?
Oh my gosh, Michael! Wow, he sure did drop. Yep, there you go.
Because
there
they're not obeying
there you go.
The 10 Commandments.
Oh, Michael.
Oh, Michael. Oh, Michale.
We already established they're just buildings.
Well, and that's actually been something that's been area of great controversy amongst churches is are stained glass windows idols or physical manifestations of God or whatever, or angels, is that idolatry? So that's fair question. I mean, to me, those whenever we create artistic expressions of something, that in itself is an interpretation. Someone's interpretation of what they see or experience. So.
Okay.
But it does
Well,
go
this-
against
You're not. I'm not giving you the answer you're looking for.
So
you're,
No, I mean,
smite the churches down.
So what we want to do is, if we each have a question that we can kind of throw back to you guys and see, like, just based on this conversation. I'll go first. My question is, if God was a person, based on how God is described, would you want to be his friend? So that's going to be my question to everyone.
Okay.
I mean, I just think that I'm wondering if the 10 Commandments are really something that is meant to be obeyed. Like, it just seems very loose in a lot of descriptions. So
think
do
of a
you feel
world that
it should be
it wasn't
obeyed?
obeyed. That would be a chaotic world.
We're living in a chaotic world.
And I guess my question is, what is your image of God?
Mhm.
And who does God look like to you? So.
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys. So we hope you enjoyed it. Definitely, if you didn't watch our first one, go back and watch that one and continue the conversation.
And definitely, also, not to cut you off, but make sure you check out Pastor Sam's sermons also, so
Yeah.
you can get a background of that as well.
But we want you to answer these questions. Definitely comment down below or talk to your friends, family about the questions as well. So you get their input on it. I mean, the more conversation, the better people will understand how other people are and why they are. So yeah, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next week.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.